Whenever I have a difficult feeling to handle, I often wonder, how do I go about dealing with that? Do I need to distract myself? Do I need to ponder on those feelings until maybe I can come by some resolution that way? Or do I need to talk to somebody? It seems like there are various outlets, assuming that they work, and it's often hard to find which one is actually going to make the difference. I've always thought in the past that distracting myself from these hard emotions is not the right way to go about things. I've come across many books and videos that actually encourage us not to distract ourselves from difficult emotions, and rather to embrace them and notice how fleeting and transient they are. Ideas like these exemplify the notion that distraction and focus are opposites of each other. But what if these two are actually more compatible than they might seem? What if the difference between being distracted and being focused is simply a matter of perspective? Let me explain. It seems to me that there is essentially no difference between focusing on something that is other than those negative emotions and distracting ourselves from those emotions. Because by focusing on anything other than that which is drawing our attention, we are also at the same time being distracted by those things. In some ways, it seems like the only real difference is how we choose to describe it. I think people often have a knee-jerk reaction to characterizing it as a distraction because it seems to imply that we are ignoring our problems and sweeping them under the rug, so to speak. But I think by being a little more discriminate about how we address different emotional situations, we're able to be a little more effective in how we address it, whether it's something that we need to dedicate time and mental energy to think about, or if it's something that we need to effortfully distract ourselves from, because by not doing that, we end up spending an unnecessary amount of time and mental effort in something that is naturally going to fade away on its own without our intervention. The main point I'm trying to make is that distraction is not what I thought it was. Distraction is not as negative or as I need to stop connotating distraction with something that is counterproductive. Focusing and distraction are two sides of the same coin. For me to decide that I'm going to focus on my work as opposed to some unproductive thought process is for me to decide that I'm going to let that work distract me from that thought process, along with all the other tapestry of unproductive things that I might occupy my brain with. Although some emotions might be solved that way, some emotions might just be a matter of not having figured something out. And so by figuring it out, you might offer yourself some relief, but there are so many others that we just ponder ourselves into numbness, even though that is really not getting us anywhere closer to a resolution. The only thing that ends up offering relief is the time that passes between the event and, however long it takes us to ponder over it. There's this idea that nothing in life is as important as it feels while we are thinking about it. Essentially, whatever we focus on feels a lot more salient when we're thinking about it than any other time. It's also a fact that we can only focus on one thing at a time. In that sense, to improve our ability to focus on anything is inherently the same as improving our ability to be distracted by anything that we don't want to be focusing on, including difficult emotions. There might also be a case to be made about how, for certain emotional difficulties, dwelling on them might actually exacerbate the problem and cause even more unnecessary heartache. Perhaps the best way to treat difficult emotions is by prioritizing them into things that can be resolved by figuring it out, or things that we just dwell on at our detriment and that we can distract ourselves from by focusing on things that are actually beneficial to us, as difficult as that might be. And obviously, the balance between emotions that we can figure out and emotions that we cannot figure out but just dwell on is not as it's not always clear. So sometimes it's not easy to tell that we are thinking about this in a productive way, or we are thinking about this at our mental health cost. And in those times, I guess I I don't know what to do. I really don't know what the answer to those difficult ones might be, but perhaps even then it might be worth just trying to focus ourselves on things that are productive, because maybe the way to reconcile that is by defaulting to focusing on things that we actually care about and things that actually matter to us, even in times of challenging emotions, even though we might not know whether the only way to get rid of those emotions is by focusing on them. Maybe by doing that, if the emotion does need more processing, we are inevitably going to do that. It's inevitable in many ways that we would still think about that and consider it again. After all, a lot of these difficult emotions are ones that are pervasive in our lives. They're usually not ones that are a one and done, where we're not going to deal with the same person who elicited those emotions again or the same things. So usually it'll come up again and we would inevitably deal with it again. So maybe leave the resolution of those unclear emotions to those inevitable moments of times when we can't help ourselves or we lose our focus. And whenever we do regain focus, to always deliberately bring it back to what actually matters to us. I would love to hear your thoughts about this in the comments. Do you think distraction is ever necessary when it comes to dealing with difficult emotions? Or do you think that just kicks the can down the road on emotions that we are eventually going to have to ruminate about anyways?